Airports open.
Tonight's story is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of introduction.
Who's gone off? Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
And this is?
Lilu Dallas Multipass.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Houston, we have a problem.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Now, where was I?
Welcome to episode 131 of the BlokeBusters podcast. I'm Paul, and today we're going to be talking about a 2019 film, just a little film, you may have heard of it. It's called Knives Out, and to help me out on this one, I have re-enlisted a friend of the podcast and relatively frequent flyer, Janelle Meghan. How you doing?
Hi, it's so good to be back. Thank you for asking me to come back. I know it's been a while, but I'm really excited to talk about this with you.
This one, basically, you just posted that you had only just seen it, and that was kind of a thing. It's like, hang on a second, I never did an episode on that. So,
yeah,
here we are today.
I'm a bit behind. I'm a bit behind on most movies and TV shows. Like, I'm likely going to see everything a year after it's come out. So, just in time.
Yeah, it's not like you just had a year and a half with nothing to do where you could have been binging these things, but
yeah.
No, it's fine.
Instead, I'm just rewatching Lost and Buffy and all the classics instead of watching anything new.
Yeah, as is tradition. But no, yes, yeah, that is always the difficult thing, isn't it? You add everything to your queue, and then you just go straight back to what you've been watching because that's what you've been watching.
Exactly. Wait, actually, I'll share with you what I'm watching now because maybe you'll get a kick out of it. I just had a trip, and on the plane, there's like limited things to watch on the plane. I started watching Castle. this TV show from like years ago that I don't think anybody's even talking about anymore, but it's several seasons in, and I just started watching it, and that's currently what I'm binging. So. Oh
yeah. I watched that with my wife fairly religiously for the first 3 seasons, and then it was one of those things where we just kind of missed an episode. And then we just didn't pick it back up again because of everything that was going on. So yes, I do want to get back into it because I know obviously it finished. So I would like to see how it finished. I was a big fan of that show, and especially how self-referential it was in a couple of things, including the obvious Firefly reference that they did for a Halloween episode, which was amazing. But
I haven't gotten to that yet. That I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, I see. You'll know which one it is because it's literally the first shot of the episode. Like you'll know it. But yeah, it's really well done, and then they move straight on with it. Like they don't linger on it too much, but it is. The one thing I will say is for that opening of that episode. It's extra funny if you remember when that episode aired.
Okay.
Because they say a certain amount of time that links up to Firefly. So
so it's kind of a meta like wink to the audience. That's very fun.
Very much so. Yeah.
But very, very fun. I mean, it kind of ties in with Knives Out because it's very much like a mystery-based show. Like I feel like a lot of the twists you can definitely, like kind of that Agatha Christie kind of feel. So it's kind of the same realm of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, very much. And speaking of Knives Out, may as well get the nuts and bolts out of the way for that as well. So directed by Rian Johnson, as many people might know him as, depending on your thoughts, the person that did a fantastic job or the person that absolutely ruined The Last Jedi. I am of the opinion that film was not bad. So yeah,
do you think you've been forgiven now thanks to this movie?
I mean, I think the problem is that the Star Wars fandom is so such a powder keg that there was not going to be a way of making that film that satisfied everyone or even the majority of people.
I agree.
Because so many people wanted more of the same, so many people wanted something different, and then he did a relatively good job of trying to thread that line but furthering the plot that was handed to him. And I have absolutely no qualms in saying that I think the ending of that film is probably one of the best endings to any of the Star Wars films.
I agree.
But yeah, he was never going to satisfy everyone, and of course, vitriol online ensued, as it usually does. So,
yeah, very passionate fans, which, I mean, I get it. No, you can't please everybody, and I do feel like Star Wars, God, they're gonna come for me now. Star Wars has such a passionate community of very diverse fans of all ages, and who have, been brought to it at different stages of their life, and things like that, that you're really not gonna please everybody. So it's unfortunate that, you have to hate on things, but I also do get it. You want to protect those things that mean stuff to you. Yeah,
and recently I did a thing where I watched the initial trilogy for the first time ever on this podcast. So yeah, that was interesting, watching those and then seeing the things that were in The Last Jedi and those and the most recent trilogy, and recognizing, oh, that's what that's from. Oh, I see now. Yeah, that very interesting. Also, some people may know him from also a film called Brick, which I believe was one of his first ones. Might not have been his first ever one, but it was one of his early ones from 2005 with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And actually, supposedly, he came up with the basic idea for Knives Out after he made that film. So.
Oh wow, that's a skateboarding movie, isn't it? Maybe not.
It's not skateboarding. No, it was his directorial debut, and it is a hard-boiled detective story set in a California suburb. But most of the main characters are high school age.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'll have to check that out. That sounds really good. But that makes more sense, because I didn't know he had like a mystery background. That's really fascinating, actually. Yeah,
and Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays the main character in it. That was actually something that my university housemates, they watched it one evening when I was working, and then they were telling me how good it was, but I just never got around to watching it, and it has been a while since then. So I need to sit down and watch it whenever I find the time at this point. Yeah,
you'll get around to it eventually, just like you said.
Yeah, it's in my queue. It's in there somewhere. But yes, so this was made on a budget of about $40 million. I'm assuming the majority of that went to the cast. And the box office worldwide of $311,605,581 US dollars. So, yeah, it did quite well. Did fairly well for itself. So well, in fact, that it turns out Netflix has agreed to pay over $450 million for the right to make 2 sequels to this film.
Oh, wow.
To be written and directed by Rian Johnson, and filming for Knives Out 2 officially began in June.
That's very exciting, honestly. And I think I heard that it's going to be about a different family or a different mystery, but with Daniel Craig still as the main character, which I love that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. And obviously we'll cover things about that in a little bit. And I'm not going to say who everyone plays in this because there's too many people to list off at the beginning. We'll obviously get to it, but Ana de Armas as Martha, the main character, and then Daniel Craig, Chris Evans, Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Shannon, Don Johnson, Toni Collette, Christopher Plummer, just so many people, including...
I haven't heard of any of these people, actually.
No, I know. There's loads.
It's just a bunch of no names. What, like a nice little indie.
Yeah, one of them was in like a Boned film or something recently. I don't know. Yeah, there's a couple of people in this that are just a little bit surprising, and I'll mention them now because they're probably not going to be really brought up after this, just because of how little their roles are. Joseph Gordon-Levitt has an audio cameo in this as a detective heard over the radio. And then Frank Oz is in this, as in the voice of Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Animal, and Sam Eagle from the Muppets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like he performed them and he was the voice of them. He is Alan Stevens, who is Harlan's counsel in this film. So yeah, they got a Muppet guy.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I would not have guessed that he was the Muppet guy. That's a very fun fact.
It is. And yeah, obviously it's fun that he did it and that he did that. But again, I can't think of any way to bring that back after this. So just figured people might find that interesting, and we'll move on. But yes, I guess my first question to you've kind of partially answered it already, but what made you sit down and watch this in the first place?
I think it was a combination of everyone had been telling me to watch it, and I was really sick of hearing people tell me to watch it. To be fair, though, that was like a year ago when it first came out. And then another thing was, so I'm sure you're familiar with Letterboxd, the app.
I am, yes.
So I was looking for a like fall movie, like kind of like a cozy fall movie, but that wasn't like spooky or scary, like a Halloween movie. And I just searched fall movie lists on Letterboxd, and I was just going through because I was in the mood to watch a movie that was like in the fall spirit. And Knives Out was one of the things that were on all of these lists, and I was like, well, I think today's the day, because I'm in a fall mood and I'm in a mystery kind of spirit. I don't know if that's a strange answer, but that's just kind of how my brain works, is I have to be in the mood to watch something, and that's kind of how I eliminate what I want to watch.
No, that makes sense. I get that. It's very difficult to sit down and watch something that you're not actually in the mood for. There have been, I'll admit, there've been a couple of times where I've been doing something for one podcast or another, and I get through it, but it's not exactly the thing that I would be choosing to watch of an evening. But yeah, no, I remember hearing about this one and thinking, yeah, that sounds really interesting. I definitely want to watch it. And then I didn't get the chance to see it in the cinema. I wanted to, and I had planned on it, and then it was just, you just can't get out. Couldn't really find the time to do it. My daughter would have been, let's see, this came out just after her 3rd birthday. So, yeah, she wasn't exactly at the age where we could just leave her at home and go out and to the cinema, and we weren't going to take her to see this film because there's no way she'd sit through it.
That wasn't the best birthday present for her, I guess.
Yeah, you're going to come and see an adult film that you're not going to pay any attention to, care any of the characters or anything like that, but you're going to go see it, damn it.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, it was something that I figured I would enjoy, and then it came to streaming, and I was like, okay, I'm going to check it out, and I did, and it was one of the things that's like, I wish I'd seen it in the cinema, but luckily for me, I had not had anything spoiled. I'd had absolutely no spoilers land in my Facebook feed or on Twitter or anything like that, which is a bit of a surprise. Because usually for these sorts of films, if I'm not careful, I'll see something. If I don't get to see it when it's first out or anything like that. Now, in this day and age where a lot of films have been coming out in the cinema and on streaming because of, just a little something that's been going on. It's been a lot easier for me to see something before the dam breaks on social media, but there's still a few things that I've had spoiled for me, including actually for Squid Game. There was a particular thing in that got spoiled for me that I will not go into any details about, because I do not wish for anyone to even potentially guess as to what the thing is. But yeah, I had something spoiled for me because it was someone shared an article, and you know how sometimes it will give you like a little blurb of the article when they shared it.
Yes.
Like just that blurb was enough to spoil one particular thing that I was 2 episodes away from.
Oh.
So yeah, it was a little frustrating, but it wasn't something that broke the thing for me or anything like that. So I wasn't too saddened by it. It was just like, oh, that would have been nice. But yes, anyone listening to this that hasn't, go see Squid Game. Yeah, maybe even someone on this podcast that's listening. Go see.
I know. I'll watch it 2 years from now, just like I did with Knives Out. Don't you worry.
Okay, there we go. So yeah, in about 3 years we can sit down and talk about it. But no.
But
all right.
But for me, for not spoilers, but I don't know about you, but I feel like the hubbub around this movie was that it was a comedy. Maybe I read into things wrong, but I feel like everyone was talking about how funny it was and things like that. So I went into it thinking it was a comedy, which it is. It has comedic elements, but that definitely kind of messed with my first viewing. So it wasn't a spoiler necessarily, but it definitely messed with my viewing of the movie when I was halfway in and I was like, oh no, this is not a ha funny comedy movie. This is a dark kind of twisted comedy with mostly just a mystery. So that it's not a spoiler, but the same thing can happen with films and TV shows where it's even just people talking about it in a certain way can ruin your perspective of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting because I went into this expecting it to be a whodunit, because what little I had seen did portray it as a whodunit type film. I also knew that Chris Evans plays a character that was very against what he has recently been playing. So it was kind of fun to see that. And I think most people, when they're thinking of, oh, it's so funny, are thinking of either Chris Evans' character or Daniel Craig's accent. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I think that most people kind of focus on that and probably talk about that the most, because those are the things that were in this film that are safe to talk about without spoiling some of the things in it. I think those are the things that are easiest and most fun to talk about, just in general conversation with other people. Now, obviously, when you're actually sitting down and seriously discussing the film, there's loads of stuff in here that's fun to talk about. But I think that was probably what you were running into there. So many people focusing on something that sounds funny, and then you sit down and watch it, it's like, oh no, the rest of it definitely is not that.
Definitely.
So yeah. Well, I'll let you lead the charge, since you were very gung-ho about this. So, what would you like to talk about first with this film?
I mean, I guess I am a huge fan of mysteries, and I feel like one thing that this does really well that kind of nods to Agatha Christie. Wait, we're doing spoilers and all that, right?
Absolutely,
okay,
yes. Anyone listening to any of these episodes, we spoil everything.
Okay,
so, yes,
they already know. Okay, great. So one thing I think that this movie does really well, kind of a nod to the Agatha Christie novels and all the great mysteries kind of from film and TV and books and all that, is just by making all of the characters so distinctive. I think that all the actors did a really, really amazing job, fully owning their character. Immediately, as soon as the film starts, you get a picture of who these people are. You can imagine their entire lives. You can imagine, why they potentially could have murdered somebody. and they're all immediately likely suspects. And I think it immediately introduces you to this really delicious world of like, oh, they all might be guilty, and they all have their own special motivations. And I just think that whole introduction scene, I think is just done so well.
Yeah, absolutely. I rewatched it today before the podcast, and yeah, I mean, this film could just be called Chekhov, the movie, because this film is absolutely littered with Chekhov's guns. It is insane the amount of callbacks there are in this film, because almost without exaggeration, the first half of this film is entirely set up, and the second half of this film is entirely payoff for those setups. I could argue there's not an Act 1, 2, and 3. There's an Act 1 and an Act 2 for this film, because it is so well done, and quite clearly a love letter to that whole style of thing, to the Agatha Christie, to the what's the name of the guy with the moustache?
Sherlock Holmes?
No, Poirot. That's that guy. Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, Sherlock Holmes. Depending on the
Does
depiction.
he have a mustache?
Yes,
Not 100% sure.
I think in one or two things he does. At the very least, Watson does in a couple of episodes of the Sherlock TV show. But yeah, no, they like to that old style of stuff. And for anyone that hasn't watched it, I don't know how easy it would be to find outside of the UK if you do not have a VPN. But Jonathan Creek is a great TV show that was in the 90s, a little bit in the 2000s, and they did a couple of things recently. And he is a magician's. He's the guy that comes up with the tricks for magicians, and then he solves the impossible crimes, like figuring out what's going on there. So like it's really interesting, but it starred people that outside of the UK you really wouldn't recognize. The main guy is portrayed by Alan Davis, who is a comedian in the UK who hasn't really come outside of the UK very much. And the people that have been his sort of second in some of the series, again, fairly well known within UK comedy and TV shows, but not much outside of it. The one that would be the most famous, I think, in the US would be, I think, the second season. The person who plays his sort of co-detective role is the person who plays Jen in the IT Crowd, whose name is escaping me right now, which is a bit frustrating, but she's really good in that. But yeah, it is fun, and it knows exactly what it is. But the mysteries are very good, and sometimes like documented around either some old Sherlock stuff or some like actual like riddles and things like that. So it's really cool to watch that. And then in this, it was so interesting to see what it actually ended up being. I thought it was almost red herring overload in that you could kind of figure out some of it, but there was no way you were going to get all of it in one go, just because the actual, and obviously jumping ahead to the end here, the fact that she actually gave Harlan the correct medication just out of muscle memory rather than reading the thing like that.
Yeah, but I don't understand how they knew that. That's one thing I don't understand. Like, I don't understand how they knew that. Like, I know that was like part of it, but I don't understand how they knew that fact. Like, I know that was, like, I know that was part of it, but that part confused me.
Yeah, I think what's supposed to be happening there is, again, along the Sherlock lines, he is correctly assuming that she is good enough at her job that she knows just instinctively, like, which vials to use, like because she is a very good nurse. So yeah, and obviously there's a limited amount of suspension of disbelief and willingness to go along with it. Otherwise, the ending does kind of fall apart a bit.
Fair.
But
I shouldn't be looking at threads or,
No, I mean, like, it's absolutely fine. That is kind of what we do. But I think the idea is supposed to be that, like, she, and I think it's even alluded to in it, I don't remember the exact wording from the dialogue, but he does tell her, like, yeah, you do know that you gave him the right medication. Like, yeah, obviously the writing was, the writing on the bottles were different, but, like, she still knew that she gave him the right medication. But then everything played out as it did. So, like, it was something, I don't remember if it's something about the specific weight or, like, I cannot remember if it was the weight or if it was like the way that it feels when you're moving it. But that was something that he said at the end, is that, like, you could tell just from holding it which one was which because of how it felt in your hand.
That does make sense, because one of them was like 500 milligrams, the other one was like 3 milligrams or something. So, like, you would, like, essentially hopefully be able to feel that difference, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, that was the dosage. I think it was 100 milligrams for the medicine he's supposed to get, and then the 3 milligrams for the morphine. And... But
I imagine there'd be less morphine than there would because the dosage is smaller. That's what my thought process is.
You'd think so.
Putting on my Agatha Christie hat.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that I really enjoyed how they gave you the information in this film, because the way that most whodunits work, and obviously it's a bit of a again a bit of a red herring, but it's not, because it's actually what happened. You get to see everyone's idea of how the party went, and you get to see that. And something that was so well done is that you get to see the same scene, but from everyone's viewpoint. So every single person talking sees themselves as standing next to him as he receives his cake.
I didn't even notice that.
Everyone talking puts himself in a different, like, part of the room or stuff like that. Like, there's one. I don't remember if it's at the beginning or if it's a little bit later on, but it's quite clear that nobody in the party, aside from I think it's Meg, but nobody in the family actually knows where Marta is from. Like, nobody actually knows.
Yeah.
So they keep giving different things for that, and so it's so interesting to see, like, all these different viewpoints, and then we do get to see the things that happened and how they then portray that, and then when we get Marta being interviewed, we just get everything. That normally doesn't happen in these films, and
yeah, I was really surprised that when that happened. I was like, wait, they're telling us exactly what happened, and I like literally checked the time on the movie. I was like, how long has this movie been on so far? It totally threw me off balance, but I think from, like, a writing and acting perspective, that's, like, a really different way to do a whodunit in that way. Of, like, okay, let's show you everything, and then actually unpack the mystery from here. Because then we're also more invested in Marta. We're more invested in her journey, and as she starts to work as a detective, we're both like, are we rooting for a killer right now? With all those moments where she's, like, kind of sabotaging the evidence, with the footprints and stuff like that. Like, it takes you, and it kind of throws you off balance while you're watching it, because you're like, who am I rooting for? Are we actually solving the mystery? Because we already solved the mystery. It lures you into this false sense of security almost during a mystery film, which I think is such an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, it was really cool, because obviously you get to see some of the duplicity from the family, but then we get every single piece of information we need for the entire film for Marta. So, like, and as you say, everyone kind of gets on her side because we see that, at least as far as we know, it was a genuine mistake. Like, yeah, she clearly likes him. He clearly trusts her. There's like no ill intent whatsoever. And then, yeah, Harlan himself is the one telling her how to get away with it because he doesn't want her or her family to get in trouble.
But did you at any point think, because, like, I don't know, I feel like there was definitely points where I was like, is she, like, the femme fatale that's just, like, gonna fool the audience the whole time? And, like, because there were certain, like, it was shot really, really well, where there were certain moments where she was, like, smiling, like, I feel like there was things that at least I read into that I was like, maybe maybe this was all just part of her game. Maybe she's just really, really good, and, like, this is all a plan. I don't know. Did you ever, like, as far as solving the mystery goes, like, did you have any theories like that?
I don't think I ever thought that she was this, like, 100%, you know, spy type character who had always intended to wheedle her way in and do this. Mostly because enough of the family were accusing her of that I thought it would have been a bit cheap to end up being that in the end. Because there was a point where I was kind of thinking, like, okay, is there something that we haven't seen yet? Like, is there anything else that potentially could sully it a little bit and could show us that even though she didn't intend to do it, once she found out about the money, like now she's happy about, like, you know, but there as I said, there were so many members of the family that, you know, the second they were inconvenient in any way, shape, or form, would immediately jump to, well, clearly this is all, like, all of this sort of stuff, and I felt that this wasn't quite the film that would have then at the very end had the turn and grin to camera moment. Yeah, that would have felt something more out of, well, funnily enough, a Halloween type film, like, you know,
sure,
you know, one of those types of films that I didn't see that coming from Rian Johnson.
That's fair. I mean, it was mostly just, like, the first half that I had that thought. Once she, like, got all the money, then I was like, oh, okay, clearly I see what's happening here. But it was just, like, that first little, like, maybe, like, you know, half of the movie before that happened, where I was like, ooh, I wonder if that's going to be the twist.
Yeah, I did think that, like, when I was first watching this, I was initially starting to think, when they were introducing everyone, like, I was initially starting to think, like, okay, is this too many people to follow? Because obviously, yeah, if you actually go through it, I haven't counted yet, but there's Linda and Richard, and then Ransom on the one side, and then you've got Walt and his wife. Then you've got Joni, who is the widow of Harlan, deceased son. You've got Meg, who is Joni's daughter. You've got Jacob, who's Walt's son. And then you've got some of the other people that worked in the house. You've also got Harlan's mother is still around. Like, there are so many people in this that I was initially thinking, are they going to be able to flesh these people out enough that we will be interested in what's going on? Because I would argue that a standard Hollywood film, if they were going to have something like this, we would get probably, I think, 3 or 4 of them would have had fully fleshed out character arcs, and then the rest would be set dressing. They would be in scenes, they would be contributing dialogue, and that's about it. But in this, everyone had significant moments. Everyone had significant character beats. And in the end, you really did realize, I think, Meg, even though by the end there was still a little bit of, like, about her, like, I think she was the most most relatable for want of a better term, out of everyone. And I don't know if that's just because she overall seemed to treat Marta the best. Just in the long run. Obviously, it's not. She doesn't treat her the best 100% of the time, but yeah, she,
the most genuine for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
funny that you're mentioning how many characters, because now that you're mentioning it, it like reminds me a little bit of a play. Where a lot of the times, you have all these characters and usually they're on stage the whole time. But, you get to know all of them. But, like, for the most part, you're getting to know them through each other almost. Which I think is kind of sort of really similar to what this film does. Where a lot of the times we're getting to know them, they're in a group together. They're chatting. They're as a family. That's when their personalities come out. Besides that, like, opening scene where they're being interrogated. Which I think to me is like kind of very similar to how a play does it, where they're not just having their solo journeys, they're having this journey like as a family as well.
Speaking of a play, actually, I don't know if you are aware of it, but there was something that I read as part of my English studies when I was at school. It was a play called An Inspector Calls, and this film has very clear vibes of that. Just as a very brief explanation for people who may not know what that is, it is a play set in the home of a sort of upper middle class family. I don't remember the year, but I believe it's set pre-World War One, post-Victoria time, but pre-World War One, so somewhere in there. And there is a family that's there, and then an inspector turns up and starts asking them questions about a young woman who has just committed suicide. And he keeps asking them about bits and pieces, and things keep coming out that basically indicate that everyone in the family has a role in this woman's suicide. And spoilers for the play at this point, I'm going to say, but at the end, he leaves and they receive a phone call saying that a young woman has just committed suicide and the police are on their way to question them. And so I wasn't expecting that from this film, but just my memory of the play and everything in that, as I was watching this, I was like, this feels very like that. It was very interesting. So I recommend people check it out. I know that there have been at least 1 or 2 film and TV adaptations of it. So it's definitely out there for people that wish to look it up. And I do recommend it. But one of my English classes, I think it was across 2 days, we went around the room and read through the play and sort of acted it out, as it were, and then spent the following class discussing it. So yeah, it was very fun.
What part did you get to play in the acting out of it?
I think I believe there's a son in it, so at that point I was the son for a bit of it, because the way that my teacher did it when I was at school is he would have us reading through the play. So we did it with that one. We did it with The Merchant of Venice, and we also did it with A View from a Bridge.
Oh wow!
And so what he would do is he would start at one end of the class and just kind of have us work our way down. And so however many characters were in the scene, he would have that many people and kind of assign, and then we'd read the scene, and then for the next scene it would cut to the next group of people, and so it would just rotate round. So everyone would do that, and as it went round, when it came back to you, you played the same character if that character was in the scene. So you would go around. So for this one, I was I believe it was the son every time that one came up. It was definitely an interesting way to do it. And thinking back on it, it must have been fun for him to sit back and just watch all of these different versions of the characters. I mean, yeah, some people were just reading lines. Some people actually got into it. We weren't getting up and acting it out. Because it wasn't drama class, it was English class, so we stayed sitting. but yeah, no, it was interesting to us. And to this day, The Merchant of Venice is the only Shakespeare play I've ever read.
Really?
Shakespeare was not my thing. I appreciate his work. I appreciate that his stuff is definitely classic. We got to see some people came to our school and did a amateur production of Macbeth. So one afternoon, all of us got to go and sit in the Great Hall, as it would be. It obviously wasn't a Great Hall, but sod it, I'm taking Harry Potter and doing that. We all sat in the Great Hall, and they performed in the center of the room the entirety of Macbeth. And that was really fun to watch. But yeah, no, the Bard never truly interested me.
I really, really encourage you to go see a professional Shakespeare performance. Because I think that might change your mind. Because if the fact that the only Shakespeare that you really experienced was like an amateur production, I feel like you might be missing out on a little bit of something. It might change your opinion.
Well, that's the thing. I'm sure that seeing a full, a full production, somewhere there was a chance that I was going to see a Shakespeare play in the West End, but it was one of those things where it was either that or something else, and the something else won out as like an overall vote in the family, so we went and saw that instead. I think in that particular instance we had the chance to go and see a West End production of a Shakespeare play, I can't remember which one it was, or Wicked, and so we ended up going to see Wicked.
That's obviously going to be the family favorite, but I definitely encourage, if you ever get the chance, to go see a Shakespeare performance by professionals. Don't go to an amateur one. Go to, like, professionals. Because an amateur one can be a little brutal. Not going to lie. But if people know what they're doing, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say flat out, like, to my memory, the people that were doing it did a very good job, especially the scene where, trying to remember, it's Macbeth in front of a fountain, basically, and he's going on. I think it's where it's either the dagger scene or shortly after, and so like he's at the fountain and he's washing his face from time to time, and then at the end of the scene he reaches into the same fountain and it's just blood that kicks his face and he walks off. And then afterwards we got to talk with him about it, and someone was like, okay, so how'd you do that? And he showed us the behind the scenes of how they did the blood in the fountain. So I remember it being well acted out. Now, I was 14, so I didn't necessarily have the most experience outside of that when it comes to play. So
you were just impressed by the blood.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the most interesting things in the play. So yes, that was 5 stars. Would see again. Yeah. Now, I mean, actually, even coming back to this, the one thing from this film that I 100% saw coming, and it didn't diminish my enjoyment of it at all, but I knew where it was going about 2 minutes before it happened. And it was right at the end when Ransom goes to stab Marta. I knew exactly where that was headed because, I don't know if you remember, there is a line that Harlan says at the beginning when we see Marta's flashback to what was happening when she was doing that whole medicine thing. When she starts, seriously looking at the medicine, and Harlan is talking about the fact that Ransom wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a stage knife and a real one.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. That is so good.
They were getting to this point, everything was ramping up, and they're standing in front of this giant thing of knives, and in my head I'm just like, he's going to stab her and it's not going to work. And obviously it hit that point and they're going down, and it's like the slow motion, which I feel like anyone that was actively invested in this film at that point could probably also just be like, yeah, he's not actually going to stab her.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But yeah, like it was this thing of, and I also had a feeling of like, I wonder if they were going to eventually say something where like literally every single sword in this kind of a parody of Game of Thrones throne that is there. Like, I wondered if they were going to say that all of them were fake, like that there wasn't a single sharp knife in that entire bunch. But obviously they didn't bother with that, and fair play to them. That would have taken away a little bit of screen time, and it wasn't necessary. Yeah, I found it was really fun when that happened, because especially since I knew it was going to happen, it was just fun watching the scene play out. Like I didn't have that dread that something would happen to Martha. I was just waiting for it to happen, which kind of gave me a different form of enjoyment for that scene.
That is so fun. I had no idea. Like, I completely missed that line. So I love that this film does that. Like, there's so many great, like, kind of throwback moments that are so fun. And I just think, like, even the shot of her, like, on the floor and, like, her reaction with, like, the chair with the knives in the background. Like, it's just such a really interesting, like aesthetic. The entire film has such an interesting aesthetic, I think, to it. That's, like, kind of spooky and creepy, but at the same time, like, this, like, dark, interesting, like, eccentric billionaire's house, that, like, and I think everything also in the house, I think, has, like, a purpose as well, where, like, even in the beginning of the film, like, they're showing, like, these weird little figurines, and one thing I noticed the second time watching it is, like, one of the figurines is, like, someone kind of climbing up a ladder, and like there are little references to like what's going to happen in some extent. So I just think that is really, really cool that, you know, they're using like this fake knife from like this knife chair and like all these different really unique elements that like an actual billionaire probably would have in his house, that it's like creepy and like fits the theme of it, but then also, you know, does make perfect sense. So it grounds it in this really interesting reality.
Yeah, I was thinking about recently, because I don't know if you're aware, but they are going to be remaking Clue. Yep.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's been in the works for several years at this point, and it seemed to just be kind of going back and forth between different studios and stuff. No. Because it was, I think it was with Fox for a bit, and of course, like, round about the time that they were going to start doing it was round about the time that Disney was going like, hey, what are you doing over there? Let me have a look. And then it was like, okay, I think Ryan Reynolds was like signed on at some point, but I don't know to what extent. And then Fox ended up dropping it, and stuff like that. Like, so it's been on the books for a while, but hadn't been made. And when thinking about this film, I was like, you know, I would actually enjoy seeing Rian Johnson making a more serious Clue. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think you need to make another comedy Clue, because we've seen what happens when people try and do that. But
I agree.
But I feel like having him do a serious but also somewhat understanding what it is version of Clue would be good. Also, random fun fact that a lot of people in America don't know. In England, it is not called Clue. At least the game itself is not called Clue. It is called Cluedo.
Cluedo?
Yep. Don't ask me why.
That was my next question.
Yeah, no, I have no idea why it's called Cluedo in England. Yeah.
Wow.
The only thing I can think of is there must have been some kind of copyright thing, because obviously obviously in England.
Is the names the same? Is it like Professor Plum? Is it Plumdo?
Yeah, no, as far as I know, there's no other difference. Or the characters are the same. The weapons are the same. The locations are the same. Obviously, unless you get yourself a themed copy of the game. But yeah, no, everything else is the same. It's just called Cluedo, which says to me that there was probably a game already called Clue when that came over, and it has since dropped into obscurity because I have no memory of any other game being called Clue when I was growing up.
I need to look this up because this feels like the Mandela effect. This feels like one of those things that's like someone would find like a Cluedo game at like a thrift store or something and be like, this was the real Clue. Because especially if everything's the same, that's so freaky.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea. I think, okay, well, once again, Americans decided to rename it. So, yeah, it was created as Cluedo in the UK in 1943. It was first manufactured in the UK in 49.
Oh, it started in the UK.
Yeah, okay,
that's fair.
Just like Where's Waldo? That was originally in the UK, and it's Where's Wally?
Wow, we've stolen everything.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Wasn't going to say, but since you brought it up, yes. So I guess what I should probably ask at this point is, what is your favorite scene in this film? Because obviously there's so many great moments and great plot threads and everything, but is there any particular scene in this that you feel really stood out?
That's a good question. I feel like a lot of the scenes between Daniel Craig and Marta's character stood out to me. Like I think they have really good chemistry, and I think the dialogue between them two is really interesting and good because you don't quite know either of their intentions. Especially, I think that scene where he first asks her to kind of be a part of like solving the mystery. Like their dynamic in that scene is very interesting to me. Because you're like, well, what is his, like, does he think she did it? Like, what is his, like, their whole, like, to me, it did a really good job in those moments of just, like, keeping the mystery alive and, like, not really knowing whose side you should be on. And plus, also, Daniel Craig's just monologue at the end, just, like, you know, all this exposition. I think it's so difficult as an actor to be able to, like, do a lot of exposition in a way that's still entertaining, and I think Daniel Craig does an amazing job of that. And I don't know if it's his accent or just because he had so much fun with it, but I think just from my perspective, it takes a lot to be able to like make that kind of dialogue entertaining, and he did a great job of doing that. So I think like that scene at the end also really hit home for me.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Craig is amazing at some of the stuff he does. I mean, yeah. Regardless of how good the films themselves are, like his portrayal of Bond has been probably my favorite out of all of them so far.
I agree.
Not that I've seen all of them, I'll freely admit, but I have so far seen all of his except for No Time to Die. Have yet to watch that. Will eventually watch it, I'm sure. But yes, actually getting out to the cinema to see things probably for the next year or so, not going to be super easy, just because, you know, 5-year-old daughter, not super easy to work around that. But I still think, I mentioned it before, but the scene where he's getting all of their viewpoints on the night in question, like right at the beginning, just because of how well it's done, that you get to hear all of them talking about it, and then you get to see all of their viewpoints, and it's so well put together that sometimes it takes a second for you to realize, hang on, I'm seeing the same thing but it's different. Like I said, you get to see them all standing next to him as the cake comes out, so it's like, oh well, I was the one that was with Dad when he got that, and he was really happy that I was there. And it's like, by the second one, if you're actively looking for it. Like, you notice it and you're like, okay, that's interesting. And then it happens again. And you're like, okay, like, what's going on here? And as you said before, like, you get a really good understanding of what each of the characters is like and what they think of themselves. And also you do get a good idea, even though the one police officer is saying, like, would someone really kill for money? Would someone really kill for a relationship? And it's like, I almost felt like that's a tongue-in-cheek bit of dialogue right there, because, like, out of all, like, there's basically, that's weak sauce, it's nothing. And it's like, that's almost every single police procedural drama ever to exist right there. It's always about a relationship, or about someone being cheated out of money, or about someone potentially losing something. And in this film, obviously, you see that these characters are all scared to death of losing what they have. But ultimately, they're right. They don't lead to him, like, to them trying to kill him. They don't want him dead. They don't want him to do what he was going to do, but they don't want him dead. So it's really fun that they put all of that in there, but they then also don't necessarily pay it off, because there's nothing to pay off from it. But it was fun that they had all of that in there, and then that was what we were able to use as the audience to build our understanding of what this family is. And what this family is dysfunctional. Yes. Absolutely dysfunctional. And it's so interesting as well, because we don't get too much from Martha's family. We see them a few times in the film, but you just don't see much from them. But you do fully understand that, despite everything, this is a family that truly cares for each other, that is, clearly loves each other. They don't care that they aren't living in a palatial mansion somewhere. Like, they're just together and they're always looking out for each other. And it's so interesting to see that they didn't even hang a lantern on it. Like, there's not a single line of dialogue in there of the people from Martha's family saying, like, oh, if only we had money, we could do this.
Yeah.
There's no one from the other family just saying something like, oh, well, they're just so poor they wouldn't know what families like. Like, they are, the wealthy people are obviously looking down on them, but there's no line of dialogue that is explicitly saying anything about family dynamic. Like, for that, and I thought it was really really interesting and kind of fun that in this film, where everyone says a lot, like, there's a lot of dialogue in this film, but in this, like, there is something that is shown rather than said, and it is just that understanding that this family dynamic, from everything we learn, is absolutely horrible. And everything we see of Martha's family dynamic, it's like, no, they're the nice ones. These people that don't have all of this money and all of these, like, they're the ones just getting by. So it's interesting. I enjoyed that.
Well, yeah, one of my favorite sort of, I guess, callback moments is when Marta, there's that scene, I forget who goes over to Marta and is like, don't worry, like, we want to take care of you, like, all of that. And then
I think it's Walt.
Is it Walt?
I think so.
Okay.
When he shows up at the apartment and he's in the hallway.
Oh, no, this is like in the very, very beginning. I think it might be Joni that goes up to her and says, don't worry, we'll take care of you. We want to take care of you, or something like that. And then when she gets the money, she kind of flips it and she says, don't worry, I'll take care of you, like... And it's, like, this very interesting thing of, like, who has the power, and, like, you didn't look at that line as, like, kind of condescending before, but then now when it's, like, flipped, you're like, oh, that actually was kind of condescending, for her to say that, and it just gives you a different perspective on everything that's been said, almost, by the family to her. Because it's like, do they have her best interest at heart? And you find out much later that, they obviously don't, when it came down to it. And they really could care less.
Yeah. It's always fun to get those sort of flip on the head moments and things like that. Yeah, it's really cool to see. One thing that I think I think most people enjoyed from this, especially given that Chris Evans was fresh off of Captain America at this point, and understandably, he was probably looking to do something a little different and to break away. There is one scene where he is absolutely, definitely not Captain America anymore, and you probably know which scene I'm referring to. That would be the scene where he tells literally everybody in the room to eat shit. Mm-hmm. And in case you didn't know, I'm about 90% certain that they initially wanted him to go around the room saying "fuck you, fuck you, fuck you," but the studio stepped in and said, "No, we can't do that." Especially since if he'd said it more than a couple of times, that would have put it up to like a hard R, which is stupid. But yeah, no.
Yeah, my favorite part of that scene, if you listen really closely, you hear someone in the background go, "I'm not gonna eat one iota of shit." It's just so good.
It's really it was a really fun moment, and again, when you're watching it for the first time, it really makes you think that Ransom doesn't care. As far as he's concerned, yeah, you all had this coming. It doesn't matter. And then as you get further down and you realize, he's one of the most cold, calculating characters in the entire film. And it's so well done. Because, obviously his dad is, he's relatively cold, but he weasels around trying to get rid of any particular evidence that he's cheating. His mother is just kind of stuck up, really. She's obviously, she wants everyone to know that she's the brains. She's the one that's running everything. She's the one that did all the hard work to get her business. That was actually one thing that I was interested in from the end, because it's made clear throughout the entire thing that she has created her own business and has done very well for herself. So she's probably the least affected in the end by the fact that she doesn't have the inheritance anymore.
I think she was maddest about the house. I think that was where she was the most upset.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was quite clear to me that she was obviously mortified at the idea that she would no longer get this thing that she considered to be her inheritance, hers. It was going to be hers. This would belong to her, and it's her family and all of this stuff. Which, to some degree, absolutely correct. Realistically, under any other circumstances, she would have been the matriarch of the new family after her dad died. But yeah, it was so interesting that all of the other characters are quite clearly very annoyed that their money is drying up. Twice. Because he was going to cut off most of them anyway. And then he died so that they weren't going to be cut off, and then they were cut off anyway. But yeah, it was interesting to me because, you can kind of see it at the end of the film when everyone turns around, everyone else is just dejected. They've all now coming to terms with the fact that they don't have money. Mm-hmm. But if you look at Jamie Lee Curtis, she's not heartbroken. She's not how do I get out of this mess now? How do I? She's just angry.
Well, her big character arc too was also, you know, finding out that her husband was cheating on her. You know, so I think that was, I think finding that letter and like, I think it reminded her that her dad was looking out for her at the end of the day. And I think she's the most understanding out of all of them. Yeah,
I mean, I got, you know, flavors of sort of just well played, like in that look. You know, obviously anger at everything that's going on, but yeah, like there was no point that I felt from her that she was worried about her financial situation. It was entirely the family is what she was worried about, and yet from everyone else, quite clearly, it's, well, where's my money coming from now? Just, you know, gotta get a job. Don't want to get a job.
Exactly.
I genuinely think that this film is one of those films that's just fairly unique. Like, I don't think we're going to quite get something like it. And I'm interested to see Knives Out 2 and Knives Out 3. I'm absolutely going to watch them. But it's going to be intriguing to see what he does with them because, yeah, again, if it was typical Hollywood, which I like to think Rian Johnson is not very often going the route of typical Hollywood, yeah, it would be copy-paste for 75%, and then write some new character names and the occasional new scene, and then move on to the third one, and you copy-paste from the second one and do it again. But I feel like he's probably going to draw on other mysteries and other things and really, I mean, I would assume, given that we're focusing more on Blanc, that we'll probably get some backstory in this one.
Oh.
Maybe it'll be he goes and solves a mystery in the place where he got his start or something like that, you know?
Well, it's set in Italy, isn't it? Or it's set somewhere international, I believe.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure what...
I remember, like, seeing, like, now filming Knives Out 2 in some place that's not America.
Yeah, I mean, that would kind of make sense, especially given the character's...
And given the budget.
Name and the character's accent do not match.
No, not at all.
Which is,
I would love it if in the next movie
fun.
he has a totally different accent. And it's just like every movie has a different accent and they're full of like crazier and crazier. And you're just like, I don't even know what the real accent on this guy is. I would love that.
Yeah, like, he puts on an accent that is just different from whoever he's around. Just to mess with everyone.
Exactly.
Cool.
So no one really knows where he's from.
Yeah. Supposedly, doing a quick look at some of the filming occurred for a month on an island in Greece.
Greece, not Italy. There you go. Yeah, because I remember reading it and being like, "Wow, I wish I was filming Knives Out 2 in Greece."
Yeah, principal photography was done in Greece, and then was halfway complete, and then the rest will be outside of Greece, but it didn't say where. But filming has officially wrapped.
Oh,
as of
exciting!
September 13th.
All right, then we should see something the next year.
Yeah, that could be very interesting. I'm looking at the cast list, and so you got Daniel Craig returning, and then everyone else doesn't have a character name next to it, which is fun. You got Dave Bautista, Edward Norton, Ethan Hawke. I am not going to be able to pronounce this last name because it has an accent in it, but it's Janelle Monáe.
Oh yeah, Janelle Monáe. She's a singer, I'm pretty sure. I didn't know she was an actress too.
Yep, a singer, rapper, and actress apparently. Catherine Hahn is in it. Leslie Odom Jr., Kate Hudson, Madeline Klein, and Jessica Henwick.
Wow.
So, obviously, very different cast to the one that we had before, and I'm intrigued to see where this is going to go, because Netflix has made the deal, so it's going to be coming out on Netflix. Rather than, I mean, I'm sure they'll do a theatrical release for it, but it'll be on Netflix as well. So,
well, that's good. Don't even have to leave your house, so I don't have an excuse to not watch it. for 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. I think, definitely it would be great to have you back for that one. Once that's
Happy to come back.
And obviously, 3, we'll put a pin in and see when that one comes out. But yeah, may as well start wrapping things up for this then. So, do you have any particular thoughts that we didn't have time to get to in the last hour?
I think the only thing I just wanted to I guess, highlight is I know that this is, like, controversial a little bit. People don't always like endings like this, but I do like the fact that it came down to Marta being a good person. Like, the fact that she was a good person with a good heart is kind of what saved her in the end. And it's a bit cheesy, I know, but I do like the fact that, like, you know, the lesson in all of this was that Marta won because she didn't play their game. And I really, really liked that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that, again, you don't see too often. At least you don't see it done well too often. You have the protagonist that wins because they're the protagonists. And very, very, very rarely you have a villain that wins because that's more interesting. But, yeah, like, to have a character stick to their guns as much as she does, and like, even it's very much built into her character because, you know, her defining characteristic, you could say, in this is the fact that she cannot effectively lie.
Yes.
She obviously can lie, but you're going to find out. So, yeah, that was good. And again, one quick thing as well. You see right at the beginning that she is capable of holding it in for a undetermined amount of time, but, you know, clearly not too long, because she does lie to the detective and then walks out of the room, goes into the toilet, and then throws up in it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, kind of building it in, because obviously we see right at the beginning when they first get her to lie, like, it's about 10 seconds. So, you know, if they'd have just left it at that, then her holding it in at the end would have been, you know, be like, well, hang on, like, if she can hold it up, and whatever, but yeah, like, they then put in that other one, and it's just like, oh, she was lying, and then, like, you don't think about it, but then, like, when it happens again at the end, you realize, like, oh, no, like, she can hold it back, but not forever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's...
Eventually it comes up, but, you know, she has some control over it. Because she also lies when he comes to arrest, Hugh, in the car, and then she has to throw up in, like, the cup, you know? So there's definitely, like, she's able to hold it in for sure.
I enjoyed it. It's also something that you just would never think of. Like, how do you come up with a character that literally throws up when they lie?
I know, like, where does that even start? Like, you know, you wonder where your mind goes.
Yeah, that's almost, you know, that's Steve Rogers times 3, like, you know, or to the power of 3. It's just like it's so wholesome. Funnily enough, it's so wholesome it's sickening. But yeah, it's just insane that they'd come up with that as an idea. And
I guess it's kind of the concept when you're writing. It's like, well, how do I want this character to be portrayed? Wholesome, honest, you know, truthful. You know, what are the qualities of that person? Well, they typically can't lie. Well, what happens if she lies? And then, like, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? You know, just kind of breaking it down there and taking those extremes, I think, is kind of probably the direction they went in with it. Yeah,
and I mean, obviously, yeah. What is a physical reaction you can have that makes it obvious that there's been a lie? And, you know, and then, again, taking it down that route, you know, having her have effectively a seizure. Number 1, that's awful. And then number 2, that could potentially be seen as either having fun at or further stigmatizing people who do experience seizures for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And then also, from a purely optics point, like, that wouldn't be good cinema, that, like, especially given the number of times that she lies in the film, like, yeah, I mean, that would be hell for the actress.
Be a
to go.
totally different movie, yeah. That's a horror movie almost.
Yeah. But then, okay, well, maybe she had a rash. Like, well, okay, no, we can't do that. And then it's like, what if she throws up? Yeah, at least it's not the other end. Yeah, that would make it... That would actually be like a scary movie parody of this.
Yeah.
If they were doing it.
A scary movie
That's
parody,
absolutely
for
the route they would go.
Yeah, that's going to be an SNL skit or a South Park skit for sure.
Yeah, I could definitely see South Park going that way. And they do it very well, because those boys have gotten better with time. I don't know how they've done it. Like, every other show in existence tends to go downhill after a certain point. But South Park, regardless of if you're still following the plot, like the actual stuff that they're doing is amazing. So, and with that, I think we've covered pretty much all of Knives Out that is worthy of note at this point. But if anyone listening to this does want to point out the obvious thing that we missed, how dare we not have talked about it, please do get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at BlokeBusters. You can email us, theblokes@blokebusters.com. You can go to blokebusters.com. It's a lovely little website, and I definitely say that because I'm the one that put it together. But yeah, check us out, get a hold of us. Love having conversations with everyone. And speaking of, Janelle, where can people find you?
You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Janelle Meghan. That's JANELLEMEGHAN. And yeah, if you have thoughts on Knives Out or any recommendations for mystery movies, please send them my way, because I'm on a mystery movie kick and I need stuff to watch in between watching Castle.
Yes, you got to supplement your mystery TV show with a bit more mystery, because there's not enough mystery.
I need all the mysteries to solve.
Indeed, yes. I mean, if you, personally myself, if you haven't, I recommend Sherlock.
I have seen Sherlock.
There you go.
But I should rewatch it, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely holds up to rewatch. It's actually just a real quick tangent at the end here. It is really interesting to watch it all in one go, because you get to see the fresh-faced Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman, and then you get to, like, over the course of several seasons, you get to see them really grow into the character and really kind of find their footing. And then at the end, it's very much something that I know a lot of people didn't like the last season, but I felt it was a very fitting send-off, especially no, I'm not going to finish that sentence, because that references the end of the season, and people that haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil what happens. So.
We can't spoil Sherlock on a Knives Out.
No, absolutely not. Can't do that.
People will not be prepared.
They will not. All right. Well, once again, thank you very much for coming on. Always a blast having you.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
And thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Hang on a minute, lads. I've got a great idea.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.